See, team, a team.
All set.
I'm just sitting for a minute. There's a lot of energy talking to me. And a couple of weeks ago, I had the gift of being able to share in a more left brainy kind of way what I've been focused on. And since then, I've kind of been doing a lot of painting. And I've noticed that what I'm exploring in the painting is what I explore in music, and it's what I explore conceptually, which is this relationship we have between space and form, and becoming sensitive to find out for each of us what's informing me, what's talking to me, what's talking through me, and then allowing that to show up in form. Christina, could you allow me to screen share, please?
Sure.
So I'll show you a tiny bit of the paintings just to give you a sense of, if in a way, how both how nebulous and yet how persistent this communication is. And what we're doing today, I think, is exploring together as a group experiencing energy. How does this best get supported in contributing something positive to the world? And my bias personally, since I'm the one with the blessing of your focus, is to help people understand themselves as energy becoming. And that there's a beauty in that, a sensitivity in that to relationship. So just to give you a sense of things, because I think you've all probably heard me sing, this is what my singing is exploring. These are these energy balls, and they started off kind of full of lines and very little empty space. And over time, they've become more and more exploratory of this sort of this emerging energy. And in there, I see communication. And some of these are tiny. They're literally 6 by 6. So that's tiny within a 6 by 6 inch piece of paper. But I've been practicing listening in this realm. Yeah, that's at full scale. And I'm just going to go really fast so I don't get dizzy. These are some of the, like, I've been combining colors. So in a way, I feel like I'm combining ideas or languages. So there's something, for me, in the experience of doing this, something beautifully subtle, tender, full of the force of an atom, and yet at the same time, very still. And these are larger, these are like 18 by 24 inch. And I know that one of the things that matters to me is helping us in mainstream language, right? Helping us to orient towards our metaphysical nature, how we connect with cosmology. And what it means to have this as a responsibility as well as a gift. Some of the colours can't really show up well in this sort of sharing setting. These are all the 6 by 6. And then these are what happened over the last few days. That's a big one. These are little. So I'm going to stop sharing. because the point is for us to talk and feel into what might show up through each of us. So each of us is like this incredible nexus point, like a point, a trajectory. If this is an aerial view, like where this crosses, there's a billion trillion lines crossing, and each of those crossing points is one of us. And so here we are together as a group intelligence, a group feeling system, a group sensing system. And the opportunity that I have that is very nebulous itself is that an art college in London where I teach once said to me earlier this year, if you do a project, we'll back you as part of our mission statement. And we don't know what that means, but it was enough. It was enough to pique my curiosity and my excitement and enthusiasm. And it's like, okay, I want to create something. I've been wanting to create something for a really long time that can have an impact, whether it's a slow, subtle impact like Bella Gaia, the musical traveling performance that uses NASA footage, a bit like Baraka, I think that was the name of the film, you know, which is all nature footage and cultural footage, showing the diversity and complexity of humanity and the planet. So there's so many different ways we could consider. And what I'd like to invite is perhaps even initially a sort of Bohemian dialogue. And what that means is that whoever speaks, speaks. And it might not make sense to that person or to us. Why that and why now? And then if there's a next person that speaks, it's the same thing. They don't actually have to follow on. It's not a conversation for a moment, just to try this as an experiment, that it's not a conversation that has to develop in a chronological, linear way. But the questions I have as my guests are, can I combine performance with information of our origins, our cosmology, with our psychology? In other words, in this sense, I mean with our self-perception. So there might be a big gap. And of course, it's going to be different for each person, what that is and what that means. And then there's over here, there's that piece that's more to do with the fundamentals of running a business. So there's all sorts of exciting ways that I could organize, but I know I need a team that has a shared vision, you know, to support getting some of these things out. And that's kind of a nuts and bolts. And I know when I spoke with David, the nuts and bolts piece was actually very important. You know, how to organize a tour. Does anyone know anyone? This is in Europe as well as here in the US. How do I, who's interested? Is anyone interested, motivated to participate for a while as a team? How does what I'm talking about touch you in a way that's relevant to you and what you're doing? So it's quite an open invitation. And if anyone has anything they'd like to say to ground it more or to just represent something that's in you right now.
Perhaps I could start. I have experience with several people who seem to have a gift, and music is at the core of it. I know a woman who is an excellent pianist who just kind of when she's in the presence of a person, just composes out of her own experience of this person. And it's quite amazing to be present in those moments, and to see the intricacies and the complexity of the tone qualities and how they mix together, and harmonies and sometimes dissonance. And it's really been interesting to me to come out of those experiences feeling different, feeling a calmness, or perhaps a resolution of something that you went into the excuse me, went into the experience with something unresolved, and then come out of it feeling more like you know what to do. So I know that there's really something to it, but I don't have extensive experience with it, and then there's there are people like the scientists who basically tell us that everything boils down to being energy of some kind, and of course sound is a part of that. And so I'm here mostly as an explorer. I want to learn more. And so, but I feel like there's strong signal in there somewhere. I'm just not sure how it applies to me personally, or to my work. But I have seen too often just how music affects me, and at times when I have not been able to get the rest that I needed or whatever, and I can put on the earphones and listen to Rachmaninoff or something, and then I come out the other end feeling way different about the whole thing. So anyway, I'm here to learn.
When you mentioned a Bohmian dialogue, it brought to mind the David Bohm's phrase, the implicate order.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of cycling in my head right now. So I just wanted to say it out loud. And that space of, I think, contemplation and witness that science shares with spirituality, can share with it, doesn't always, but can. And the sensitivity that certain fields of science, I think, bring to reality, experiencing a reality. And also then, so that, and that community, the experiencing thing then brings me to an idea of community. Like, how do we build communities of connection and practice around this work? I think this is a sort of a, isolating, alienating time in many, many ways. And part to me of what of an offering is how could your project magnify connection and community?
That really excites me.
When I was looking at the drawings, Claire, one of the things that I was observing is just from like cognitive and emotional space, conflict was, I can feel, I can sense a little bit of what the drawings were speaking to, the emergence of it, the transitions of colors and different, the usage of the gaps and whatever was wanting to show there. In my head, I was thinking, who will understand this? what kind of people are working towards even relating to this. And where do we find communities of these people with your goal of traveling around the world, touring with them, or touring, stopping at their places? And just those questions came about. And people who are already working in some ways, the somatic, emotional, spiritual work is embedded in that community. Who are not afraid to face what comes up, to what is experienced. Who are willing to introduce that to a more than that community. And who are very different than who you are seeking. Those are feel complete.
I appreciate all the unfinished thoughts and questions very much.
I got the stuff you were talking about, Claire, and then showing the thinking about the music and the painting and the overlap. And I mean, I thought the swirling images were really powerful. It made me think of a project that my cousin-in-law has done called Water Rising, and she did it with her husband. And he's a sculptor, she's a writer. And so they decided to like switch media a little bit. So she wrote poetry and he did watercolor. They did them separately, and then they combined them and put them in together in a book, and they had a movie made out of it, and they kind of toured around with it a little bit. But it just a couple of things that struck me. One is this idea that they kind of kept it secret. They kept it secret from each other, and then they brought the paintings and the poems together, and like without much difficulty matched them up. Like there were paintings that described the pictures to describe the paintings, and there was a synergy. And I suspect if you take this out, you're gonna find amazing synergy. You know, it's gonna you'll discover it or it'll discover you, kind of, you know, however this goes. So I have, you know, a high probability that, you know, it will resonate. And I wonder how much it would resonate with other people, you know, I mean, or other artists, you know. Is there a way to let people scaffold off of it in some sense? You know, how do you make that invitation to continue? But anyway, it's beautiful stuff.
You've reminded me of something, David, something I found super exciting. There's I think it was I can't remember if it was the Tate Modern. There's a very, very famous gallery in the UK, and they did an experiment where it was the Turner Contemporary, so it's sort of Turner and contemporary artists. And what they did, they're based in Kent, not in London. So Kent, as you look at a map, is in the southeast, close to London. And they did a 3-year project. I'm not proposing I do a 3-year project, but anyway, they did a 3-year project, and they advertised in the local newspapers and online, and invited anybody at all to come and co-curate an exhibition. And it was based on a poem. And various people, they documented the whole thing, various people showed up for various reasons. So for some it was loneliness. For some, they were new to the area and they wanted to meet people. For some, they did identify as artists and they just wanted to be involved. And their task was to explore the geography and locations of the area and select 100 artists. So it was kind of a combined thing, so that artists could be matched with locations to create some kind of a shared story. And they interviewed these participants over this period of time. And from that came personal transformations around self-perception. And a lot of the people that didn't identify as artists, even if they weren't creating the art, did identify as artists by the end. For me, that personally feels like an achievement because of how I define an artist. So I define an artist as somebody who dances with reality. Doesn't matter how you're doing that. So when you were talking, David, it reminded me also of a performing artist I know called Anne Randolph, who I've studied with. She does monologues and writing and acting. And after her performances, she does workshops with people straight away and the next day, like, so maybe for a weekend. And I'm realizing that one of the things that would actually bring me great joy and, you know, presumably be very useful to people is to have an experience of how I explore numinous space, how I explore being human, cosmologically human, terra human, is that then we could actually have people doing things and exploring their own experience of inspiration. And then potentially part of that workshop could be matching up things, you know, and generating some kind of sharing, an informal performance. And I love the idea, because I'm not one that likes all the attention. I like the attention long enough to get something across that feels like pressing inside of me. But this meets my need for presenting something to generate a sense of inquiry, but then folding people in so they can actually have their own experience that they'll take with them that might keep unfolding. And it just becomes a start point on a journey, on an ongoing journey. So a new start point for somebody on their ongoing journey. So I'm really liking that idea because I like the way, I think that's good for funding as well. If I can show something that actually tangibly celebrates and invites people to explore their creativity and their humanity at the same time.
And also could perhaps be, you know, have its own income stream. People will, you know, engage in and pay for workshops that are, you know, so that's always a good element.
Yeah, thank you.
I had some success with something like that in San Francisco, with bringing together people in a way that they kind of the more spiraling that comes out of it, the better kind of thing. And it was challenges and opportunities within different areas of climate. And we did a few. One in particular, or I guess I'll say it a different way. I would bring the people together and then tell them that they're the experts. And I said, I just brought you here. Like, I made some slides. I found some articles for context about this issue. And like, each one of you're the expert. And it was great. It was always great. There was also Thai food, so that was nice too. And yeah, and so that sounds like a kind of a version of what you're describing. And David Hodgson was actually at one of them, the one on Internet of Living Things. And that one, there were presenters, 3 presenters. Usually it was just a roundtable discussion, but that time there was a presentation and there was maybe 40 people there. And afterwards we had to almost push people out because they were just in these hives buzzing, you know, and we're like, okay, we're turning the lights out now. There's bars everywhere. Please leave. So that was really cool. Yeah.
Can you
That
say a
felt
little
good.
bit more about like what prompted it and then what it generated afterwards?
Yeah. What prompted it was we were residents of an open science program called Many Labs. Tito and I, and part of our residency was to just host conversations and kind of do design thinking, because we were trying to make a for-profit startup within kind of a more science-oriented space. So we that was sort of part of our offering that we could just do through the community, through the nonprofit, and we liked it. It was mainly because we liked it. We didn't bring our company's brand into it or anything. We were just like, this is a meetup. We like doing it. It's fun. It feels good. And then what came out of it, it's hard to say, it's hard to track it, but people meet each other, people get inspired by something they learned, and then they can turn to somebody next to them who was also inspired, and then something brand new comes up, and then they go home and now they have that. So then where does that go? And just, we were doing them, I think it was either monthly or bi-weekly, bringing people together, hang out, and then eventually it moved to just doing it on the phone. And I thought that worked quite well also, giving people, each person, a chance to talk in a way that was, the question was, what is climate change today? And what are you doing about it? And that, in that way, it's like, well, you know, it changes. What it is for you is different. And that also felt like a lot of opportunity for people to share really their best and their most edgy and what was really happening for them at that moment. So yeah, I hope that, I'm sure there are some connections there.
Thank you.
Claire, because you're thinking this is a UK-based opportunity, what I think we've talked about the Wellcome Trust before.
Ah, God, I love that place.
Well, but because they're so you know, health and wellness and medicine oriented, and it seems to me like, and they have jillions of funding. I wonder if that might be a place for, you know, to apply for a grant or a residency or something to develop the, you know, as a seat.
I think it's a brilliant idea. I appreciate that very much. And if I have like the logo of Central St. Martin's next to the project name, you know, that helps. And I'm so touched by the serendipity of impulse, because when I spent a major part of the last 2 years in the UK and a big part of that in London, I was very much part of this organization called the What Next? It's called whatnextculture.co.uk. And you've got literally the director of the Barbican or the Royal Festival Hall, directors and performers of theatre, like all the well-known places and then the lesser known places. And people would show up in person every single week for an hour on a Wednesday morning. I think it was just from 8 to 9 in the morning, and discuss policy around art, and, you know, in terms of how politics is affecting art, how Brexit was affecting grants, you know, because the UK was going to be leaving Europe. Does that mean all the artists are now completely like out to dry financially, and what happens to their collaborations. And then because of COVID, it all went online, which made it massive because now anyone could attend a London meeting without having to travel. So the complexity and diversity of all the different kinds of people related to the arts, including STEAM versus STEM, so much mental health and wellness. So I'm actually aware that I feel like I'm nudging towards that moment where I can actually present this idea to that community. And when I'm ready to do that, that's a big explosion waiting to happen, you know, of ideas, invitations, around funding, around venues, and so on. And one of them is actually a traveling. They support artists of different kinds to travel around the country, to be invited into people's living rooms or in a pub or sort of unusual spaces, not your traditional art gallery, but creating community. That's the purpose of it, is to enhance the lives of each community that an artist visits in a way that's ongoing after the artist leaves. So kind of pollinating inspiration and intimacy. I'm a big fan of intimacy, exploring that. So yeah, that the Welcome Trust is definitely that they're part of it. That's why it made me think of it. And it's such a rich ground. Like there's so many cities in the UK. I think that's why I'm called to go there, because there's so many cities around the UK that understand how essential the arts are for our evolution, for our health and wellness, for our cohesion, social cohesion. So I can feel things stirring, and I'm very grateful. Sorry,
it seems,
Colleen, go ahead.
I'm sorry. It seems to me that artistry, creativity is that thing which takes us beyond just mere survival. As a community builder right now, I have a lot of thoughts about how we build culture within our community. And, you know, the big messengers of culture are the arts, you know, I mean, how we identify, you know, an ethnic group or whatever is very tied to what sort of artistry that they manifest. And it's also difficult when you're trying to bring people together from various parts of the world and the sensitivities of people who have not been treated well in the past by their neighbors or by, you know, conquest or whatever the situation was, taking ownership of certain parts of this creativity process. and those sensitivities are really difficult. You know, I mean, sometimes you think that you're honoring them and you're actually stepping all over them. And I just wondered what your thoughts are as, you know, as we go forward. Because I've thought, you know, how did those things get started in the first place? You know, how did a musical tradition or a dance tradition or an artistic tradition, how did it get started originally in a particular culture? Because I'm kind of asking that because I kind of need to know how to do that. Because I mean, what we're doing is kind of a break from conventionality, but we don't want to turn our back on the good parts of it. But I just have been thinking a lot about that, and I'm very attracted to your work because it addresses some of those issues. And just wonder what your thoughts are about that.
It would help me, Colleen, to hear a little more, if possible, when you say that what you're seeing in the work addresses some of those issues. Could you possibly say a little more about that, how you see that, and what you see?
Well, as I contemplate, we're setting up new villages. And I see that each village will have its own personality, and dependent on the people who gravitate to that particular place. So we're really doing some placemaking, as well as culture building within each village. And there may be some that have a predominance of one ethnic group or another, and it'll just be sort of a natural outcropping of whatever the majority of the people there are doing. But on the other hand, I've had to change the name of this community because I was stepping on a culture. and that was very uncomfortable for me, because the whole point of it was to honor that culture. And then I realized that it wasn't being perceived that way at all. And so what I'm seeing with your music and your art is kind of very primal, in terms of it kind of goes beyond, a particular manifestation of culture and whatever. It goes deeper than that. And so I guess you seem to be at the headwaters somehow. and how do we get people to not just go back to their defaults? Like, okay, I grew up in America, in the western part of the United States, and we do, Arizona type dancing or something like that. And, we have our kind of country music expression or something like that. How do we keep people from defaulting to whatever it was that they learned as a child as part of their own enculturation? How do we get deeper than that? Does that make sense?
It's a big question, isn't it? Thank you for going further with it. There's a few things that come into me to say, not necessarily in any particular order. So one is that I think my personal bias, Colleen, and that's what it is that culture comes from the land. The only way I can explain why culture is different around the world is because the land, it's associated with the land. And so I see that as how things emerge through us. And there was a time when I was sort of angry a lot of the time, thinking that humans were super arrogant. Like, well, why should this be called a tree? Why should that be called a bird? Why has this got this Latin name? And then one day I had this thought that made me laugh, because it's like, well, why do I think all of that came from humans? Why is that my thought, my assumption, that it just came from this part of a human, the head? So to me, the way I'm oriented, everything starts with the land and the elements and the relationships, the systemness, the living aliveness of that, and that the journey is about becoming part of that. So emerging as part of that and discovering as part of that, being informed by that, by those dynamics. I have my own relationship to causing offense in cultures. I've done it. I've been humbled, shamed, embarrassed, corrected, and I'm grateful for all of that awkwardness and discomfort, and have apologized where I've gotten it wrong. I think the safest thing one can do is to just keep asking questions within cultures, within locations, within communities, rather than coming in as the white saviors or anything like that. And the thing I've learned over time is that I have had the most impact when I've had the least intention to. So a very small example is that I was living in LA for a period of time and I wasn't working for a moment. So I saw this opportunity online to join a health video filming thing. People were looking for participants so they could film a fitness video series. So I went to that on a daily basis and was running every day and was eating well. And I was just doing it because I was doing it. And then after a number of weeks, one of my housemates, she had started running. And she said to me that watching me do it inspired her to choose to do it, to do her version of that. That watching me live a life a particular way caused something in her to move in a direction that worked for her too. And I hadn't talked to her about it. I didn't have an opinion about her doing it. But that's when I realized it's like, oh, of course, I guess people are watching each other all the time and gaining ideas and thoughts and insights. The other thing, the final thing I want to say to this is that one of the pieces of the project for traveling is that I actually have a plan that I've been hearing it come forward to go to some of the more long-standing cultures in Europe and to record people telling stories in their native dialects and their native tongue, the stories of the land, as a listener. And so that's just in there too. So for me, the greatest teacher is probably the land and the elements. That's who I listen to. That's who I'm humbled by. Thank you so much for what you're asking about. And
Well, it gives me hope, Claire. It gives me hope because the land is beautiful. And if we can get people to get their hands in the soil and wake up to the bird calls and really become in tune, I think the culture will sort of develop on its own. We'll have our own poetry. We'll have our own unique sound or whatever that comes out of all of that. So that very much gives me hope. Thank you.
You're welcome. And you're reminding me again, just another thought. I think the most important thing anyone can do is to share what they love. When you do that, people can feel it, and it activates something in each of us that's unique to our own personal territory. So I would say that's perhaps something to consider.
So what I'm picturing as you speak is this very place-based, outdoor, hyper-local, democratic, community, open invitation, event-based happenings, right? And possibly with a deeper dive the following day, or a workshop or something like that, but that helps people access their internal knowing and creativity, and that broad definition of what is an artist. Because I think a lot of people right now feel really stuck and they don't feel access to their own voice, their own, sort of agency. So what is, and how very simple acts of making sound or making circles or making conversations, or that these are artistic acts. Like that's something that I think is liberating, right? That, painting a circle is might be all you need to do, right? And that a lot can be expressed there and explored there and communicated there. I'm right now I'm painting blue circles on everything, so I feel you.
I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed with it. I mean, I'm in love with what I'm doing right now. And of course, to me, the point is not what you're doing, it's how you're doing it and why. How are you bringing yourself to those blue circles? What part of you is asking for that, right? And to have that curiosity, like so with dynamic emergence, that's the second tenet. Energy waits to be noticed. So anything that each of us is doing or thinking or whatever, to notice that we're doing it, to notice that there is something traveling through us, to just notice that just explodes a person into their own cosmology, into their own questions. They might not language it the way I do, but that curiosity is our connection and our evolution. I feel appreciation right now because I'm realizing as I travel, and I'm talking geographically, literally at the moment, I will have you with me, each of you, because you witness me, you're witnessing me. And so that is community, that is support. And I feel it, I feel it building. And it will be true for each of us, because as we witness somebody being supported, we know it's safe. And so we can ask for support too, each of us, in perhaps weird and funny, unique ways.
And that's the very thing to replicate. That's the pebble to drop in the pond for other people.
Yeah. It might be that for some people that they think an idea is too little to be important enough for attention. So the way this space is held, the invitations that I've had from you, Christina, and you, David, in particular, and Joe privately, and Matthew, and so on, like we have relationships. There's obviously something very tender in the way this space is held that makes it possible to find the little things, the little bits in that topsoil that want to emerge.
Curious about two questions actually that are popping up. There are a few voices in this room that have not been heard yet. And I am wanting to make space for them, also very respectful for them choosing, not that. And the second question is, in love for you, Claire, do you have what you need, what you are seeking, what you wanted out of this conversation? I've heard the sense of support. I've heard that you feel that you belong to us and we belong to you. And these are my paraphrasing, of course. Mm-hmm. Is there anything else that you would need from us? And choose as you may. Care for who you are, where you are. And be here, however that seems to be. So, curious.
Thank you, Joe. So there are two very different presentations there, and I feel like I should go with your first invitation to see if Richard and Tristan, if either of you, and Mana, if you're happy as things are, or if there are things you'd like to share.
I'm in more of a outlier mode today, but I'm really appreciating everything that's happening. And sorry I was late, but I'm glad to be here. And it just feels like you're getting filled up and celebrated, and with some good ideas and thoughts. And I just really like that. And if I have anything else to share, I certainly will. And I'm just here in support and appreciation.
Claire, Tristan mentioned he's happy just listening. So there you have it.
Thank you.
Well, I can voice a question that's been arising for me. That's what is regenerative about regenerative artistry? What does it, since this is a forum of regeneration, what is regenerated? And what is the primal regenerative process that artists tap into? So that's a question that's coming up for me. And I wonder if anybody would care to speak to it.
As is with the perceptions of the world, I think we all have ideas and thoughts and opinions about what is regenerative aspects of a regenerative artist. But I can go. For me, it's embodied sense making, sense weaving, and sense making and sense weaving experience that's expressed in ways of, I'm making this up as I'm going, right? That is expressed in ways to connect at different levels. It's like a fractal for me.
Like we're talking about the land and having art be something primal that emerges through us from the land, and the land is in trouble. I'm thinking that a lot of artists that I have tuned into have done what Donna Haraway calls staying with the trouble. And it is sometimes uncomfortable, but just in the same way that one beautiful piece of music that was tuned into the earth also embodied trouble. That was the Lied van de Erde, the Song of the Earth by Mahler. And it was very much about the earth, relationship to the earth, life and death, things like that. And one of the things that I think in any kind of regeneration of a living system has to do with the restoration of circulating energies. And I wonder what has been we know that the living world, the land, has been traumatized itself and is in need of regeneration. And our neurobiologies emerge from that land, and including the impulse to connect with beauty, the impulse to create culture and art. And I wonder if how the same forces that may have impacted creation, impacted the biosphere, have also impacted the way we show up and relate to one another as artists, regardless of the art form, and whether the nature of art needs and our ways, our life ways of participating in the aesthetosphere need to be themselves regenerated. I know that a lot of art has been framed in terms of individuals, and we're actually our social cultural creatures. Our brains are cultural brains, and that's how they evolved, and that's how they developed. So I wonder if the culture itself and our own understandings of ourselves as culture creating beings, if that itself needs to be regenerated to cross an evolutionary threshold. So those are some of my thoughts. Yeah.
That actually feels like it ties in a little bit with this kind of image I have in my head of this very grounded, democratic, place-based, experiential event, because how do we connect with reconnect with our own inherent creativity? To me, Joe was speaking about fractal. To me, it's almost like the opposite. It's almost like source. Like for me, creativity is about connecting with whatever source means in its very, very kind of essential, elemental way, which then is again it's very grounded, it's very earthy, it's very connected to the elements in the land and sea and sky. And as people, if we can get back in harmony with that living system and understand our power, not over it, but in it, within it, that's where the hope is for me. That's where the juice, the creativity can unleash is. Yeah.
I think it's fun, Richard, because
Go ahead, David.
I had been, I think, thinking primarily of kind of the arts as a way to kind of explain and inspire the ideas of regeneration. And I think you're pushing towards, like, what is regenerative art, kind of, which is something like I stick regenerative in front of everything, and I'd never done it with art, so it's like, oh yeah, right, that's a good question. And I just wanted to point it in the chat. I stuck in a Cesar's project. I've not interacted with him. I don't really know him. I've been getting a bounce email from him saying that says I'm out on the ocean doing an installation. I was like, well, what are you doing? And so it's worth taking a look at what it is. But he's building a meeting space that is also an oyster hatchery that he's launching off of Hong Kong. And the thing itself looks kind of like an oyster, I think. And anyway, it's got like 6 different dimensions that I think are really fascinating. Kind of community building. It's got art. It's got actual engagement with living systems. And anyway, so it's a project that I think is just really fun. And it was sitting there, and I had no idea what's going on.
I can't wait to check that out. Thank you. What a brilliant, inspiring, bonkers idea. I love it. The thing that came up because of what you've sort of provoked and prodded, Richard and Christina, how you were responding, I circled back to the workshop idea, like doing the performing and then doing the workshops, and realizing that that's about connecting with in terms of why would someone choose to do it, that it would be about connecting with their creativity and personal meaning. That I think is the impulse for me around bringing people in to have to explore together.
People are hungry for it.
Yeah, I think that's true. Personally, we'll find out. But it gives me an environment in which to just be me, be the me that used to crawl around on the forest floor as a child. And then when I was old enough to have a camera to take close-up pictures of mushrooms and leaves and, you know, just like these, what I'm painting now, and like your blue circles or whatever each of us is focused on, this kind of repetitive, compulsive kind of unique exploration that lasts as long as it lasts. And then it's done for then. So in terms of, Joe, your practical question, what I'm going to do is put my email in the chat. Thank you for that question too, Joe, because it's a good one. It's very easy to be blah, 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 and it's like, okay, what do I need? What do I need? So my invitation, I'm going to extend an invitation. And that way I don't feel like I'm imposing on anyone. But there are practical things to consider, like crafting a project proposal, for instance, which I've never done a formal proposal, so that I can get funding, or maybe people know locations and organizations that fund things like this. So I feel like I need some practical support in terms of people that are willing to spend an hour or two doing something specific, you know, to help kind of ground and develop the layout of what this is. So if anyone feels like that's an impulse in each of you or any of you, then please contact me and we can find out what that might look like. Anything, any kind of random ideas, or an offer of an hour or two of your time. I don't know, but we're building something. I'm building something, and I'm part of a we. So I hope that's a clear enough ask. I've sort of left it relatively open. Thank you, Joe. And there are things that are natural and knowledgeable to you that are way out there for me, you know. So don't underestimate the power of what you might have to give that could make a big difference.
Well, and this is, for me, this is like, Claire, again, you're like the case study that, you know, I'd love to like replicate kind of. It's like, if we can help Claire be more successful, we can help lots of people, you know. And so,
Yeah.
and my theory is that you have to be a little bit specific in your invitation and your ask. It's like, you know, because people have to know how they're going to contribute kind of, or what they're contributing into or something. I think people are willing to contribute in general, but it's like, you know, that, you know, what is the, so I do feel like somehow or another we need to create, I think of it as modularity, or it's like we need to create a structure wherein people can contribute. And I don't know what that structure looks like particularly, but I'd love to help figure out how to develop it.
I appreciate that. I've just put the question there, shall I create a list of needs? That might be a good thing to do, where I don't feel self-conscious. And there's always the anxiety about over asking, you know, welcome to being a human.
If it had a little bit of, if there were a little bit of a scaffolding of like the context of the potential project, you know, the pieces you feel like you maybe do know something about, and then, you know, highlighting where the gaps are, then people have a little bit of a sense of how to, you know, how they can plug in.
And that might be exactly where I need the help, actually, right?
Uh-huh.
Because that I you know, but I will do that because that's something I can sit with. And if I find myself stuck, then it's like, okay, so this is actually the first place I need help. So that's a good idea.
Claire, I wanted to offer a reframe for the list of needs. Perhaps thinking about list of opportunities and possibilities. Keep it more open. So, and then go into different aspects of those, how to concretize those opportunities, how to make those possibilities more like probabilities.
Okay.
Transitioning into that. If you stay at the needs, I'm worried you're going to go into a scarcity mindset and renounce everything that's possible or not include. Yeah. thoughts. That's it.
Thank you. Look at the time, Christina.
Yes, I did. I just was noticing that, and thinking that what I've done with some other people when I'm sort of closing out a meeting, you know, that's fairly open, is, you know, somebody starts a document, and at least then some of the words get, you know, this idea of a scaffold begins, and the conversation doesn't just you know, vaporize. So that is a thought in terms of, you know, how to a next step could be a document with your notes and some further thoughts, and you know, a little bit of a vague sketch of some ideas and connections, and then a request for people to chime in.
Thank you. I can definitely do that and post a link to it somewhere in the Slack.
Yeah. I mean, if we
Community.
put it in, I mean, the Regen Narratives thread, and we can, I'll put this video there, and then we can all revisit. Give us all a little ping and a reminder to check in once there's a document there to look at.
David's on it already. Speedy.
I just created an anchor post or whatever for the thread.
Perfect.
I just want to say thank you. Seriously, beautiful, beautiful big thank you to each of you. Thank you for the invitation, Christina, the encouragement, David, and to each of you for just being present at that. What a gift. Thank you so much.
Glad we could be here together, and we'll see you all here next week, or if you can and want to come. Michelle will be talking about the let's see, what's the next theme in our biodiversity. She'll be presenting on biodiversity next week. Okay.
All right.
Thanks for doing
Thanks,
this,
Christina.
Christina.
Take care,
Thanks,
everybody.
Claire.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Claire.
Yeah.
Thank
Everybody.
you, Golly.
Bye.
Thank